The Sunday roast was getting cold on the table when Andrew's hand slammed against my chest. My back hit the dining room wall so hard that my late wife's cabinet rattled. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. My daughter Alicia sat frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. My two grandchildren, Tyler and Sophia, stared at their plates like nothing had happened. Not one word of protest came from anyone. Andrew's face was inches from mine, his breath hot with anger. "Don't you ever question me in front of my kids again, old man," he hissed. His forearm pressed against my ribs until I could barely breathe. I was 73 years old, and this man half my age was using me like a punching bag while my own family watched in complete silence. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not my spirit, but something else entirely. The part of me that had been trying to keep the peace for the past 5 years since Alicia married this monster. I looked into Andrew's cold blue eyes and made a decision that would change everything. I whispered so quietly that only he could hear. "This old man remembers everything, son." After Andrew finally let me go, the family went back to eating like nothing had happened. The sound of forks scraping against plates filled the terrible silence. Alicia asked Tyler about his math test. Sophia complained about her soccer practice. Andrew carved more roast beef with the same hands that had just assaulted me. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My shirt was wrinkled where his arm had pressed. There would be bruises tomorrow. But what hurt more than any physical pain was the silence. My own daughter had watched her husband attack me and said nothing. My grandchildren had learned that violence was acceptable as long as you pretended it didn't happen. I splashed cold water on my face and made a promise to myself. If my family saw me as weak and disposable, then I would use that against them. I would play the part of the helpless old man until the moment came to show them exactly how wrong they were. Walking back to the dining room, I picked up my small notebook from the kitchen counter. While they talked and laughed, I quietly wrote my first note. Andrew shoved me against wall. Family said nothing. Sunday, October 8th, 6:47 p.m. By Monday morning, the bruise on my chest had turned a deep purple. It spread across my ribs like spilled ink. When I lifted my shirt to examine it, the pain shot through my body like electricity. I had to sit down on the edge of my bed and catch my breath. At the pharmacy, I bought pain medication and bandages. The young clerk, a girl about Sophia's age, noticed me wincing as I reached for my wallet. "Did you fall, sir?" she asked with genuine concern. "Something like that." I lied, too ashamed to tell her the truth. Too ashamed to admit that my own family had watched me get hurt and done nothing to stop it. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror again, staring at the evidence of Andrew's cruelty. The bruise was ugly and dark, but it was also proof. Physical evidence of what kind of man my daughter had married. What kind of man my grandchildren thought was normal. I touched the tender skin gently and whispered to my reflection, "If they think I'm weak, I'll show them how dangerous a weak old man can be." The next Sunday dinner, I decided to test how far I could push the act. I made my movements slower and more careful. When I reached for the salt, I let my hand shake just slightly. When I stood up from the table, I used the chair for support like my legs couldn't hold me. Andrew noticed immediately. He smirked when I dropped my napkin and took extra time picking it up. "Getting clumsy in your old age," he said with a laugh that had no warmth in it. Alicia looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Tyler and Sophia giggled along with their stepfather. But while Andrew was busy feeling superior, I was studying him. I watched how he cut his meat with aggressive strokes. How he interrupted Alicia when she tried to speak. How he corrected the children with sharp words that made them flinch. I memorized every cruel habit, every moment of control. By the time we reached dessert, I had cataloged a dozen small cruelties that my family had learned to accept as normal. Andrew thought he was winning some kind of game. He had no idea I was collecting ammunition for a war he didn't even know was coming. On Tuesday morning, I drove to my credit union downtown. I had been banking there for 30 years, since before Alicia was born. The manager, Mrs. Patterson, greeted me like an old friend. "What can we do for you today, Frank?" I explained that I wanted to move my savings into a trust account. All of it. My retirement money, my Social Security, even the small inheritance I had gotten when my brother passed last year. Mrs. Patterson raised her eyebrows, but didn't ask questions. She had seen enough families torn apart by money to understand the need for protection. "This trust will be irrevocable," I told her as I signed the papers. No one else can access these funds without my specific written permission. The documents were thick and official, full of legal language that would have made Andrew's head spin if he had bothered to understand them. Walking out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. If Andrew thought he could bully me because I was old and dependent, he was about to learn how wrong he was. My money was safe, and soon I would find out just how much of his respect depended on what he thought I could give him. That evening, I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I heard Andrew on the phone in the living room. He was talking to someone, probably one of his drinking buddies from work. His voice was loud and confident, the way bullies sound when they think no one important is listening. "You should see how easy it is to handle the old man now," he said with a laugh. "One little push, and he practically begs for forgiveness. Alicia's dad used to think he was tough, but he's just another weak-old fool who needs me to take care of his precious daughter." I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, staying out of sight, but close enough to hear every word. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From pure rage. The best part is, he's got money saved up. Alicia says he's been putting away his Social Security for years. When he finally kicks the bucket, we'll be set. In the meantime, I just have to put up with his lectures about respect and family. Andrew's laughter filled the house like poison. I crept back to my room and wrote down every word I could remember. Date, time, and Andrew's exact phrases. If he wanted to talk about my money, I would make sure those words came back to haunt him. The next afternoon, 10-year-old Tyler was helping me carry groceries from the car. He was a good kid, despite having Andrew as a role model. As we walked up the driveway, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Grandpa Frank, Mom said you might sell the house soon. Is that true?" He looked worried, like the idea of me moving away scared him. "She said Andrew thinks it would be better for you to live somewhere smaller." I stopped walking and looked down at my grandson's innocent face. "When did your mom say that, Tyler?" "Last week, after you went to bed." Andrew was talking about how old people don't need big houses and how the money could help our family. Tyler shifted the grocery bags in his small arms. "I don't want you to move away, Grandpa." I ruffled his hair and forced a smile. "Don't worry about that, buddy. Grandpa's not going anywhere." But inside, I was furious. The house had been mine and my late wife's for 40 years. We had raised Alicia here, celebrated every holiday, created every family memory within these walls. If Andrew thought he could push me out of my own home and sell it for his benefit, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating Frank Morrison. The next morning, I called my attorney, James Walsh. We had gone to high school together 60 years ago, and he had handled all my legal affairs since I retired. "Jim, I need to update my will immediately. Can you see me today?" At his office, I explained the situation without going into too much detail about the physical violence. "I want to add a no contest clause," I told him. "If anyone challenges this will or tries to have me declared incompetent, they forfeit their entire inheritance." Jim nodded knowingly. He had been writing wills for 40 years and had seen every kind of family drama. "That's a smart move, Frank. It prevents people from fighting over your estate after you're gone." He paused and looked at me carefully. "Is everything all right at home?" "It will be," I said, signing the documents with a steady hand. The new will left everything to a trust that would benefit Tyler and Sophia's education, but only if Alicia divorced Andrew within 6 months of my death. If she stayed married to him, the entire estate would go to charity. Walking out of Jim's office, I felt a grim satisfaction. Andrew's greed had always been his weakness. Now it would be the trap that caught him. He just didn't know it yet. That Sunday, Andrew was in an especially foul mood. He had been drinking beer all afternoon while watching football, and Alicia was walking on eggshells trying to keep the children quiet. When dinner was ready, he complained about everything from the temperature of the food to the way Alicia had set the table. "Why is the old man always staring at me?" Andrew demanded, pointing his fork in my direction. "It's creepy, like he's plotting something." I looked up from my plate with the most innocent expression I could manage. "I'm just enjoying dinner with my family, Andrew. Not everything is about you, son." The word son hit him like a slap. His face turned red and his jaw clenched tight. "Don't call me that. I'm not your son, and you're not my father. You're just some old man who happens to live in the same house as my wife." Alicia tried to intervene. "Andrew, please. The children are listening." But Andrew was beyond caring. He slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. Tyler started crying, and Sophia ran to her room. The violence in Andrew's eyes told me everything I needed to know about how close he was to breaking completely. The next morning, I found my late wife Margaret's photograph on the hallway floor. The frame was cracked, and glass was scattered across the hardwood. It was the picture from our 40th wedding anniversary, her smiling face now cut by jagged lines. Alicia was cleaning up the mess when I discovered it. "What happened here?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "It must have fallen off the table," she said without meeting my eyes. "The kids were running around last night after dinner." But Tyler and Sophia were both afraid of Andrew when he was angry. They would never have been running around the house while he was in one of his moods. This was Andrew's work, another small cruelty designed to hurt me where it mattered most. I knelt down and carefully picked up the largest pieces of glass. Margaret's face was broken into fragments, but her smile was still visible in each piece. "It's okay," I told Alicia quietly. "Accidents happen." But later, in the privacy of my room, I wrote down every detail. The cracked frame, Alicia's lies, the timing right after Andrew's outburst at dinner. I was building a case, piece by piece, moment by moment. Andrew thought he could break me down with small acts of destruction, but he was actually giving me exactly what I needed to destroy him. Over the next few weeks, I began wearing a wrist brace that I didn't actually need. I walked with a slight limp and used the stair railing more than necessary. At the grocery store and around town, people began treating me like a frail old man who needed help reaching high shelves and carrying heavy bags. Andrew ate it up. He made jokes about my failing health at dinner. He offered to help me with simple tasks in a voice dripping with fake concern and real mockery. "Careful there, Frank. Don't want you breaking a hip." Alicia looked increasingly uncomfortable with his behavior, but she still said nothing. I could see the guilt building behind her eyes every time Andrew made fun of my supposed weakness. She knew something was wrong with the situation, but she was too afraid or too loyal to her husband to speak up. The children began treating me like an invalid too. They spoke louder, assuming I couldn't hear well. They moved slowly around me, worried I might fall. It broke my heart to see them learning to see their grandfather as pathetic and helpless. But every cruel comment, every mocking laugh, every moment of false concern was being carefully recorded in my notebook. Andrew thought he was breaking me down, but he was actually building the foundation of his own downfall. The real breaking point came during Alicia's birthday barbecue in our backyard. Andrew had been drinking since noon, and he was feeling bold in front of our neighbors. He kept making jokes about my age and my supposed clumsiness, getting louder each time someone laughed. When I stood up to refill my drink, Andrew deliberately stuck his foot out. I saw it coming and could have stepped around it, but instead I let myself stumble forward. I caught myself against the hot grill, my sleeve brushing against the flames. "Whoa there, old-timer," Andrew said loudly, making sure everyone saw. "Better be more careful. These grills are dangerous for someone your age." But Mrs. Henderson from next door had seen exactly what happened. She rushed over to check if I was hurt, shooting Andrew a look that could have melted steel. "That was no accident," she whispered to me as she examined my singed sleeve. I patted her hand gratefully. "Some accidents aren't accidents at all, Dorothy, but sometimes they show people's true character." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I had witnesses who were paying attention. Andrew's cruelty was starting to show in public, and that would be his biggest mistake yet. That night, I slipped a small digital recorder into my shirt pocket before dinner. The device was tiny, no bigger than a matchbox, but it could capture hours of clear audio. I had bought it online, telling myself it was for recording my memoirs. Andrew was in a particularly nasty mood. Alicia had burned the chicken, and Tyler had spilled his milk. Instead of helping or showing understanding, Andrew went on a tirade about incompetence and disrespect that lasted 20 minutes. "This whole house is falling apart," he shouted. "Your father is useless, you can't cook a simple meal, and your kids are brats who don't listen to anything. I work all day to support this family, and I come home to chaos and stupidity." He turned on me specifically, his voice filled with venom. "And you, old man, sitting there like some kind of king expecting everyone to wait on you hand and foot. You're a burden on this family, and everyone knows it. The sooner you accept that, the better off we'll all be." Alicia tried weakly to defend me, but Andrew cut her off with language so foul that Tyler started crying. The whole scene was captured perfectly by my hidden recorder. Later, alone in my room, I played back Andrew's voice. Every insult, every threat, every moment of pure cruelty was preserved forever. Soon, those words would be played back in a room where Andrew couldn't escape them. 3 days later, I clutched my chest during breakfast and gasped for air. Alicia rushed to my side while Andrew rolled his eyes. "Call 911. I whispered, making my breathing shallow and rapid. The paramedics arrived within minutes and loaded me into the ambulance. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez ran every test possible. My heart was fine, but the stress readings were genuinely high. When Andrew arrived, still annoyed about missing work, the doctor pulled him aside for a serious conversation. "Mr. Morrison's stress levels are dangerous for a man his age," Dr. Martinez said sternly. "Has there been unusual tension at home? Arguments? Any kind of aggressive behavior that might be affecting his health?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "He's just getting old. You know how elderly people can be dramatic about everything." "This isn't dramatics," the doctor replied coldly. "This is a 73-year-old man whose body is shutting down from chronic stress. If this continues, he could have a real heart attack." I made sure to request copies of all my medical records before leaving. The documentation about stress-induced symptoms would be very useful later. My supposed weakness was becoming Andrew's legal liability, and he didn't even realize it. Over the following weeks, I quietly gathered every piece of evidence I could find about Andrew's financial irresponsibility. Credit card statements left on the kitchen counter. Overdue notices stuffed in drawers. Bank letters threatening account closure that Alicia tried to hide from me. I discovered that Andrew owed $12,000 in credit card debt. His car payment was 3 months behind. He had borrowed money from Alicia's 401k without telling her, claiming it was for home improvements that never happened. The man who called me a burden was drowning in his own financial failures. I made photocopies of everything and organized them in a folder under my mattress. Bank statements showing overdraft fees. Credit reports I obtained by claiming I was worried about identity theft. Late payment notices with Andrew's name in bold red letters. The most damaging document was a loan application where Andrew had listed my house as collateral without my knowledge or permission. He had forged my signature and claimed I was co-signing for his debt. The loan had been denied, but the attempted fraud was documented in black and white. Andrew thought he was the smart one, the one in control. But while he was busy bullying me, I was quietly building a case that would expose him as the financial disaster he really was. That Sunday, I placed a thick manila envelope on the dining room table before anyone sat down. The envelope was sealed and had "Private, Do Not Open" written across the front in my careful handwriting. Andrew noticed it immediately. His eyes kept darting to the envelope throughout the meal, curiosity eating away at him like acid. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. "What's in the envelope, Frank?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing completely. I cut my roast beef slowly and chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Just some papers I need to take care of tomorrow. Nothing that concerns you." "If it's on my dinner table, it concerns me," Andrew said, his voice getting sharp. "I have a right to know what's going on in this house." I smiled and pulled the envelope closer to me. "Actually, Andrew, this is my house. My table, my envelope, and my private business." Alicia looked nervous. Tyler and Sophia sensed the tension and ate quickly. But Andrew's face was turning red with frustration and anger. He wanted to grab the envelope so badly that his hands were actually shaking. His curiosity and need to control everything was becoming his weakness, exactly as I had planned. Late that night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Alicia knocked softly on my bedroom door and entered when I called out. She looked exhausted and worried, older than her 42 years. "Dad, I need to ask you something," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Are you planning something? Andrew thinks you're hiding money or maybe changing your will." I studied my daughter's face in the dim light from my bedside lamp. She looked scared, but I couldn't tell if she was scared for me or scared of what Andrew might do if he felt threatened. "Would it matter to you if I was?" I asked quietly. She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Everything feels wrong lately. Andrew's been so angry, and you've been so secretive. The kids are starting to notice that something's not right." "Something's been not right for a long time, Alicia. The question is whether you're finally ready to see it." She left without answering, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The doubt that would soon crack her loyalty to Andrew wide open. She was starting to see the truth, even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet. The next Sunday, I called everyone into the living room after dinner. Alicia looked nervous. Tyler and Sophia sat on the couch, sensing something important was about to happen. Andrew leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, trying to look bored and superior. I thought it was time we had a family discussion about respect, I said, pulling the digital recorder from my pocket. About how people should treat each other in this house. Andrew laughed, but it sounded forced. What's that supposed to be? Some kind of recording device? Are you spying on us now, old man? Just documenting some conversations, I replied calmly. Would you like to hear one? Without waiting for an answer, I pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the room, loud and clear and full of venom. Every cruel word he had spoken at last week's dinner came pouring out of the tiny speaker. Alicia's hand flew to her mouth. Tyler's eyes went wide with shock. Sophia started crying. But Andrew just stood there, his face going from red to white to green as he heard his own voice calling me a burden and using language that made his stepchildren cringe. The recording played for 3 full minutes before I finally turned it off. The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew tried to stammer out excuses, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out a second recorder, this one containing his phone conversation about my money and his plans for my death. This one's interesting too, I said, pressing play again. Andrew's voice filled the room talking about how easy it was to handle the old man and how he was waiting for me to die so he could inherit my savings. Alicia stood up so fast she knocked over her coffee cup. Andrew, how could you say those things? It wasn't. I didn't mean. He's twisting everything, Andrew sputtered, but the recordings spoke for themselves. His own words, in his own voice, revealing exactly what kind of person he really was. Tyler looked at his stepfather with disgust. You said mean things about Grandpa Frank. You said you wanted him to die. Sophia ran to my chair and hugged me tightly. Don't die, Grandpa. I don't want you to die. Andrew realized he was losing control of the situation. His face was bright red, and his fists were clenched. You had no right to record me. That's illegal. I'll call the police. Please do, I said calmly. I'd love to explain to them why I felt the need to document threats and verbal abuse in my own home. Before Andrew could respond, I pulled out my final surprise. A folder full of signed statements from neighbors who had witnessed his behavior over the past months. Mrs. Henderson saw you deliberately trip me at Alicia's barbecue, I said, reading from her handwritten statement. Mr. Garcia heard you screaming at me through our kitchen window. The Johnson family watched you shove me in the driveway when I was carrying groceries. Alicia sank back into her chair, her face pale. Dad, why didn't you tell me about any of this? I tried to tell you, honey, but you weren't listening. You were too busy pretending everything was normal while your husband was terrorizing your father. I spread the neighbor statements across the coffee table like playing cards. Each one was dated, signed, and detailed. Mrs. Henderson's statement even included photos she had taken of me examining my singed sleeve after the grill incident. Your neighbors saw what you refused to see, Alicia. They were willing to stand up for me when my own daughter wouldn't. Andrew was backing toward the door now, realizing that his victims and witnesses were closing in around him. This is insane. You're all insane. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this. But I wasn't done with him yet. I had saved the most devastating evidence for last. Before you go, Andrew, there's one more thing you should know, I said, standing up and walking to my desk. I pulled out the official documents from my lawyer's office. I've updated my will. There's something called a no contest clause, which means if anyone tries to challenge my decisions or have me declared incompetent, they lose everything. Alicia looked confused. What does that mean? It means that if you stay married to Andrew, you and the children inherit nothing. But if you divorce him within 6 months of my death, Tyler and Sophia will have full college funds and you'll be financially secure. The room went completely silent. Andrew's mouth fell open. Alicia stared at the legal documents like they were written in a foreign language. You can't do that, Andrew said, his voice cracking. You can't control Alicia's marriage from beyond the grave. I'm not controlling anything, I replied. I'm simply choosing not to financially support a man who has spent 5 years abusing me in my own home. Alicia can make her own choice about what's more important to her. Tyler looked up at his mother with wide eyes. Mom, does this mean Andrew has to leave? For the first time in 5 years, Alicia had to choose between protecting her children's future and protecting her husband's feelings. The next morning, I made sure to arrive at church early. During the coffee and fellowship time before service, I accidentally dropped a folder near the refreshment table. Papers scattered everywhere, and several church members rushed to help me pick them up. The papers were photocopies of Andrew's bounced checks and overdue notices. His financial problems were now visible to half the congregation, including his boss who attended the same church. "Oh my goodness, Frank," said Mrs. Patterson from the bank. "These aren't your accounts, are they?" No, I said loudly enough for others to hear. "These belong to my son-in-law." I was trying to help him organize his finances, but I'm afraid the situation is quite serious. Andrew arrived just as I was explaining to the pastor that I was worried about Andrew's gambling problem. There was no gambling problem, but the overdue credit card statements and the casino rewards card that had fallen out of the folder told a different story. "What the hell are you doing?" Andrew hissed, scrambling to collect the papers while people stared. "Language, Andrew," I said gently. "We're in church." By the time service started, everyone knew that Andrew was drowning in debt and that his father-in-law was covering for him. The whispers followed us to our pew and continued throughout the entire service. That night, I heard shouting from Alicia and Andrew's bedroom. The argument went on for over an hour, with Alicia's voice getting louder and more angry as time passed. "How could you embarrass our family like that?" she screamed. "Everyone at church thinks you're a deadbeat who can't pay his bills." "Your father set me up," Andrew shouted back. "He planned the whole thing to make me look bad." "Maybe you made yourself look bad by actually not paying your bills. Maybe my father is finally tired of being treated like garbage in his own house." I heard something crash against the wall, followed by Alicia's sharp intake of breath. Then her voice, deadly quiet. "Don't you ever throw anything in this house again, Andrew. Don't you ever." A door slammed, and I heard Alicia's footsteps in the hallway. She went downstairs and spent the night on the living room couch for the first time since they'd been married. The next morning, Tyler asked her why she had slept downstairs. "Sometimes adults need space to think," she told him, but she wouldn't meet Andrew's eyes during breakfast. The cracks in their marriage were finally showing, and Andrew knew it. He was losing control of his family the same way he had lost control of his finances and his reputation. 3 days later, Andrew stormed into my bedroom while I was reading before sleep. His face was twisted with rage, and he moved like a man who had nothing left to lose. "You think you're so smart, don't you, old man?" he snarled, advancing toward my bed. "You think you can destroy my life and get away with it?" I stayed calm, even though my heart was racing. "I didn't destroy your life, Andrew. I just stopped letting you destroy mine." He raised his hand as if to hit me, and for a moment I thought he actually would. But then Alicia burst through the door like an avenging angel. "Touch him and you lose us all," she said, her voice like steel. "Touch my father, and I will make sure you never see Tyler and Sophia again. I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are." Andrew's raised hand froze in midair. He looked back and forth between Alicia and me, realizing that his reign of terror was finally over. Alicia was done being silent. She was done pretending that his behavior was acceptable. "Get out," she said quietly. "Pack your things and get out of this house. Tonight." Andrew looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Alicia's eyes told him that she meant every word. 2 weeks later, Andrew was gone. He had moved in with a friend from work after Alicia filed for divorce. The house felt peaceful for the first time in 5 years. Tyler and Sophia could laugh without worrying about setting off Andrew's temper. Alicia smiled more often and slept better at night. She came to my room one evening to apologize for all the years of silence. "I was afraid," she admitted through tears. "I was afraid that if I stood up to him, he would leave, and I'd be alone with 2 children. "You were never alone, sweetheart," I told her, hugging my daughter tightly. "I was always here. I was always ready to help and protect you. I just had to find a way to make you see that you deserved better." The legal papers were filed within a month. Alicia's divorce was finalized, and Andrew signed away his parental rights in exchange for not being prosecuted for the forged loan documents. Tyler and Sophia's college funds were secure, and Alicia had learned to recognize the difference between love and control. I sat in my favorite chair that evening, looking around the living room where my family was finally safe and happy. The bruises on my chest had healed, but the scars on my heart would take longer. Still, I had won the most important victory of my life. Sometimes an old man's revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about protection. Sometimes it's about teaching people to value what they have before they lose it forever.